The clatter of silverware against fine china filled Westwood's most exclusive restaurant as Vanessa Mercer sat alone at a table meant for two. She stared at the empty chair across from her, her husband's napkin still folded neatly beside the untouched appetizer. The waiter approached cautiously. "Can I get you anything else, ma'am?" Vanessa didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the far corner of the restaurant where her husband of 7 years, Elliot, was leaning in close to a stunning woman with copper hair. Their laughter carried across the room, piercing Vanessa like shards of glass. "Actually," she said, her voice steadier than she expected, "I'd like the check." The waiter followed her gaze, understanding dawning on his face. "Of course, ma'am. Right away." As she signed the credit card slip, adding a generous tip, Vanessa caught Elliot's eye across the room. He straightened, guilt flashing across his face before he quickly looked away. Pretending not to see her, Vanessa stood, smoothed her black dress, the one Elliot had always loved, and walked toward the exit with practiced poise. She passed close to their table, close enough to hear the woman say, "Isn't that?" before Elliot cut her off with a too loud laugh. Outside in the cool night air, Vanessa didn't cry. Instead, she pulled out her phone and made a call. "Alex, it's Vanessa. Remember that favor you owe me? I need it now." 3 months earlier, Vanessa had been happy, or at least she believed she was. Their brownstone in the city's most desirable neighborhood was a showcase of their success. Her thriving interior design business and Elliot's partnership at Crawford and Weiss Investment Group. Their Instagram-perfect marriage was the envy of their social circle. "You guys are literally couple goals," her friend Zara had said at their last dinner party, watching Elliot refill Vanessa's wine glass without being asked. 7 years and you still look at each other like that." Vanessa had smiled, leaning into Elliot's casual touch on her shoulder. "We just fit," she'd said simply. What she didn't say was how that fit had begun to feel like a well-worn routine rather than the passionate connection they'd once shared. Date nights had become predictable, conversations shorter, silences longer. She'd attributed it to the natural evolution of marriage, the comfortable plateau after the initial climb. The first sign something was truly wrong came when Elliot started working late. Not just occasionally, but 3, sometimes 4 nights a week. His explanations were plausible. A major client acquisition, quarterly reports, strategy meetings that ran over, but there was something in his tone that rang hollow. "I miss you," she'd said one night, standing in the doorway of his home office where he'd retreated immediately after dinner. "I'm right here," he'd replied without looking up from his laptop. "Are you?" she'd asked, but he was already absorbed in his work again. Then came the password changes on his phone. The mysterious text notifications he'd quickly dismiss. The sudden interest in his appearance, new clothes, a different cologne, extra time at the gym. Classic signs she should have recognized sooner. "Do you think Elliot is having an affair?" She'd asked Zara over coffee one morning, the question burning her throat on its way out. "Elliot? No way," Zara had insisted. "That man worships you." Vanessa had wanted to believe her. But that afternoon, she found the receipt from La Maison, an upscale jewelry store they'd never visited together, in his jacket pocket. The date, 2 weeks earlier. The amount, $3,200 her birthday had passed months ago. Their anniversary was still months away. That night, she'd searched their bedroom while Elliot showered, looking for the telltale jewelry box. She found nothing, which somehow felt worse. Whatever he'd purchased wasn't meant for her. The next morning, she did something she'd never imagined doing. While Elliot was in the shower, she checked his phone. He'd left it unlocked, a rare oversight. There were dozens of messages from someone labeled simply MT. The most recent, "Can't wait to see you tonight." "Our usual spot?" Vanessa had felt physically ill, replacing the phone exactly where she'd found it before retreating to the bathroom to splash cold water on her face. She stared at her reflection, a woman she barely recognized looking back at her. The confident, self-assured designer who commanded rooms and charmed clients was gone, replaced by someone fragile and uncertain. But as she studied herself in the mirror, something shifted in her eyes. A hardness formed, a determination. No, she whispered to her reflection. Not like this. She wouldn't confront him yet. Not until she knew exactly what and who she was dealing with. For 2 weeks, she'd played the role of unsuspecting wife perfectly while gathering information. Credit card statements revealed regular charges at a hotel downtown. Phone records showed frequent calls to the same number at odd hours. And finally, after following him one evening when he claimed to be meeting clients, she discovered who MT was, Morgan Teller. Elliot's college girlfriend who had supposedly moved abroad years ago. The one who'd broken his heart before Vanessa had carefully put it back together. Morgan had apparently returned to the city 6 months ago to take a position at a competing investment firm. According to LinkedIn, she was now Morgan Teller Harrington, married, at least on paper. You need evidence? Alex had advised when she finally confided in her older brother. Concrete proof before you confront him. Alex, a former military intelligence officer turned private security consultant, knew about collecting evidence. He also knew about protecting his little sister, which is why he'd offered to help. Just say the word, he'd told her. 1 call, and I'll get you everything you need. But Vanessa had hesitated. Part of her still wanted to believe there was an explanation, that the man who had promised to love her forever couldn't possibly be betraying her so callously. That hesitation ended the night of their anniversary dinner. Elliot had suggested Luciana's, the exclusive restaurant where they'd had their first date. He'd seemed genuinely excited, more engaged than he'd been in months. Vanessa had allowed herself to hope. Perhaps she'd been wrong. Perhaps this was his way of recommitting to their marriage. She'd spent hours getting ready, choosing the black dress that Elliot had always said made her look like a movie star. She'd styled her dark hair in loose waves, applied her makeup with careful precision, selected the diamond earrings he'd given her on their 5th anniversary. They'd arrived at the restaurant on time, were seated at a romantic corner table. Elliot had ordered champagne, reminiscing about their first date. For a few precious minutes, Vanessa felt the knot in her chest loosening. Maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong. Then his phone had buzzed. He'd checked it, his expression changing subtly. "Excuse me," he'd said, standing. "I need to make a quick call. Work emergency. Now?" she'd asked, unable to hide her disappointment. 5 minutes tops, he'd promised with an apologetic smile. Start without me. 15 minutes later, Vanessa had grown concerned. She'd texted him, "Everything okay?" No response. That's when she'd spotted them, Elliot and Morgan, being seated at a table across the restaurant. Elliot's back was to Vanessa, but she had a clear view of Morgan in a stunning emerald dress, her copper hair cascading over bare shoulders. They were clearly not discussing business. In that moment, something inside Vanessa had broken, and something else, something harder and colder, had taken its place. In the days following the restaurant incident, Vanessa moved through her life like an actress playing a role. She returned home that night to find Elliot already there, fabricating a story about an urgent client call that had forced him to leave the restaurant. "Why didn't you come back to the table to tell me?" she'd asked, her voice perfectly controlled. "I tried calling you," he'd lied smoothly. "You must not have heard your phone," she'd nodded, pretending to accept his explanation. "It's fine. These things happen." Later that night, as he slept beside her, she'd made her decision. The call to Alex had been the first step. The evidence her brother's team collected was comprehensive and damning. The affair had been going on for 7 months. Hotel receipts, photographs, text messages recovered from the cloud backup of Elliot's phone. Dinner reservations. Weekend trips disguised as business travel. A hidden credit card Elliot had been using to fund their relationship. Most devastating was the discovery that Morgan was pregnant, 3 months along. The jewelry receipt Vanessa had found was for a pair of diamond earrings to celebrate the news. "What are you going to do?" Alex had asked, his face grim as they reviewed the evidence in his secure office downtown. Vanessa had stared at the photographs spread across the desk, Elliot and Morgan embracing outside her apartment building, holding hands in a park, sharing an intimate meal at a restaurant 2 blocks from the brownstone where Vanessa waited alone. "I'm going to make sure he remembers me," she'd said quietly, not just as the wife he betrayed, but as the woman who took everything. "Nessa," Alex had warned, "be careful. Revenge can consume you." "This isn't revenge," she'd replied, her voice cold and clear. "It's justice." The plan had formed with surprising clarity. Vanessa knew Elliot's weaknesses, his vulnerabilities, his secrets, the kind only a spouse of 7 years would know. She also knew his ambitions. Elliot was 6 months away from being named managing partner at Crawford & Weiss, the culmination of years of calculated career moves. The position would double his salary and give him significant equity in the firm. The only obstacle was Harrison Crawford, the conservative founder who valued family values and loyalty above all else. "I need access to Elliot's work laptop," she told Alex. "Can your team manage that?" Alex had hesitated. "What exactly are you planning?" "Nothing illegal," she'd assured him. "I just need to understand exactly what he's been working on." What she discovered exceeded her expectations. Elliot had been secretly feeding information to Morgan about Crawford & Weiss's acquisition targets, information her firm was using to outbid them or secure competing deals. The betrayal extended beyond their marriage into professional territory. It wasn't just unethical. It bordered on illegal. Meanwhile, at home, Vanessa maintained the perfect facade. She packed his favorite lunches, pressed his shirts just the way he liked, and pretended not to notice when he came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume. She even suggested they start trying for a baby, watching something like panic flash in his eyes before he composed himself. "Let's talk about it after the partnership announcement," he'd deflected. "The timing would be better then." "Of course," she'd agreed with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Whatever you think is best." 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, Vanessa invited Harrison Crawford and his wife to dinner at their home, a gesture Elliot couldn't reasonably refuse given Harrison's position. She prepared an exquisite meal, decorated the house with fresh flowers, and wore a modest but elegant dress that Harrison's traditional wife would appreciate. "What are you doing?" Elliot had hissed when she told him about the invitation. "I handle the work relationships." "I thought it would be nice," she'd replied innocently. "You're always saying how important the personal touch is in business." The dinner had gone perfectly. Vanessa charmed the Crawfords with her warmth and intelligence, steering the conversation toward family values and loyalty in both personal and professional relationships. "You've found yourself a remarkable woman." "Elliot," Harrison had commented, raising his glass in Vanessa's direction. "In my experience, a man is only as good as the wife who stands behind him." Elliot had smiled tightly, raising his glass in agreement. "I'm a lucky man. We're hoping to start a family soon," Vanessa had added, watching color drain from Elliot's face. "Aren't we, darling?" That night, after the Crawfords had left, Elliot had confronted her. What the hell was that about? "We agreed to wait on the baby discussion." "Did we?" Vanessa had asked, collecting wine glasses with steady hands. "I must have forgotten." The next morning, she'd put the final pieces of her plan in motion. First, she transferred half of their joint savings to a separate account in her name only. An amount she was legally entitled to, but that would complicate Elliot's financial situation considerably. Next, she contacted a real estate agent about listing their brownstone, which was primarily in her name since her family had provided the down payment, citing a desire to downsize before starting a family. Finally, she scheduled a lunch with Diane Weiss, the other founding partner of Crawford & Weiss and the only woman on the executive committee. Diane had always been an advocate for women in finance and had a particular distaste for men who underestimated them. The lunch had been productive. Without directly accusing Elliot, Vanessa had raised concerns about information security at the firm, mentioning patterns she'd noticed from her unique perspective as the wife of a partner track associate. "Sometimes the greatest threats come from within," she'd suggested carefully. "Especially from those with competing loyalties." Diane had studied her with shrewd eyes. "Are we still talking about cybersecurity, Vanessa?" "I'm simply concerned about protecting what matters," she'd replied. Both personally and professionally, the seed had been planted. Vanessa knew Diane would investigate, and what she would find. On the night Vanessa had planned for the final confrontation, she prepared Elliot's favorite meal, herb-crusted rack of lamb with roasted potatoes and asparagus. She opened an expensive bottle of red wine and set the dining table with their best china and candles. When Elliot arrived home, his expression darkened at the elaborate setup. "What's the occasion?" he asked cautiously, loosening his tie. "Do I need an occasion to cook for my husband?" She replied, gesturing for him to sit. He complied, though wariness remained in his eyes. Vanessa served the food and poured the wine, making small talk about her day as if nothing was amiss. She could see him relaxing gradually, probably assuming this was just another of her attempts to reconnect. Halfway through the meal, she placed a small gift box beside his plate. "What's this?" he asked, forcing a smile. "Just a little something to mark the occasion," she said, taking a sip of wine. "Go ahead, open it." Inside was a silver USB drive with a handwritten label that read simply, "Remember me." Elliot stared at it, confusion giving way to unease. "What is this, Vanessa?" "That," she said calmly, "is a copy of everything. Your texts with Morgan, the hotel receipts, the information you've been feeding to her firm." She paused, watching his face pale. "Oh, and congratulations on the baby. I assume it's a boy since you always wanted a son." Elliot's fork clattered against his plate. "You've been spying on me?" "No, Elliot. I've been protecting myself." She took another sip of wine. "Which is something I should have done years ago." "This is invasion of privacy," he sputtered, anger replacing shock. "You had no right." "Don't talk to me about rights," she cut him off, her voice suddenly sharp. "You lost the right to privacy when you started sleeping with your ex-girlfriend in a hotel 3 blocks from our home." He stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "You don't understand. Morgan and I—" "Save it," Vanessa interrupted, remaining seated. "I'm not interested in your justifications or your apologies. What I am interested in is how we proceed from here." "What does that mean?" he asked, suspicion narrowing his eyes. "It means I've already spoken with a divorce attorney. The papers are being prepared." She gestured to the USB drive. "It also means copies of that information have been securely stored with my brother and my attorney, to be used if necessary." "Are you threatening me?" He loomed over her, his face flushed with anger. Vanessa didn't flinch. "I'm explaining the reality of our situation. You've been betraying not just me, but Crawford and Weiss as well. How do you think Harrison would react to learning his promising young partner has been feeding inside information to a competitor? Or that he's fathered a child with that competitor's new rising star?" Elliot paled. "You wouldn't. I already have." She smiled thinly. "Not the full details, of course. Just enough to raise concerns. Diane Weiss is quite thorough when it comes to protecting her firm's interests." He collapsed back into his chair, the fight draining from him. "What do you want, Vanessa?" "I want a clean break," she replied evenly. "I'm keeping the brownstone. You'll transfer your half to me as part of the settlement. I've already withdrawn my fair share from our joint accounts, but I won't touch your personal funds or investment portfolio." "And if I refuse?" "Then Harrison Crawford receives evidence that his protégé has been committing corporate espionage. Morgan's firm learns she's been sleeping with a competitor's partner while pregnant with his child. And both of your careers implode spectacularly." She leaned forward. "Is that really how you want to start your new family?" Elliot stared at her, a mixture of fear and grudging respect in his eyes. "I never thought you could be this cold." "And I never thought you could be this cruel," she countered. Yet here we are. They sat in silence for a long moment, the candles flickering between them like the last embers of their marriage. Finally, Elliot spoke, his voice hollow. "When did you know?" "About Morgan, I mean. I suspected for months. I knew for certain the night you left me sitting alone at Luciana's while you joined her at another table." Vanessa's composure cracked slightly at the memory. "Do you have any idea how that felt? To watch my husband walk away from our anniversary dinner to sit with another woman?" "I didn't know you saw us," he said quietly. "That's the thing about betrayal, Elliot. It happens whether the betrayed person witnesses it or not," He reached for his wine glass, his hand trembling slightly. For what it's worth, I did love you. Maybe part of me still does. Vanessa stood, gathering her plate and glass. It's worth nothing. Love without loyalty is just a convenient fiction. She moved to leave the room, then paused in the doorway. The divorce papers will arrive tomorrow. Sign them, move your things out by the weekend, and we never have to see each other again. Fight me on this, and I promise you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Is that it? He asked, sounding almost desperate. 7 years together and that's how it ends? Vanessa turned back to him, her eyes clear and direct. No. 7 years together ended the moment you decided we weren't worth fighting for. This is just the aftermath. As she walked away, she heard him call after her. How did you do it? Stay so calm, plan so carefully, when you must have been hurting? She stopped but didn't turn around. Because you taught me something important, Elliot. You taught me exactly who I am when everything falls apart. She glanced back over her shoulder. And as it turns out, I'm stronger than either of us ever imagined. 1 year later, Vanessa stood in the gallery space downtown, surrounded by the sleek, minimalist furniture designs that had become her signature. The exhibition opening was the culmination of her transformation from high-end interior designer to recognized furniture designer, a pivot she'd made after finalizing her divorce. To Vanessa Mercer Designs, Zara toasted, raising a champagne flute. The fastest-growing name in contemporary furniture? Vanessa smiled, clinking glasses with her friend and the small circle of supporters who had stood by her through the past year. Alex was there with his wife, beaming with pride. Her parents had flown in from Chicago. Even Diane Weiss had come, having become something of a mentor after the dissolution of Vanessa's marriage. I couldn't have done it without all of you, Vanessa said sincerely. The gallery buzzed with influential critics, designers, and potential buyers. Her clean lines and innovative use of sustainable materials had caught the attention of major design publications, and orders were already exceeding production capacity. Ms. Mercer? A young assistant approached. There's someone asking to speak with you. I told him you're busy, but he insisted. Vanessa followed the assistant's gaze to the entrance where Elliot stood awkwardly, looking both out of place and thinner than she remembered. His normally immaculate appearance seemed slightly disheveled, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. It's all right, she assured the assistant. I'll handle this. Crossing the gallery, Vanessa felt surprisingly calm. The sight of Elliot no longer triggered the pain and anger that had once consumed her. Instead, she felt a curious detachment, as if he were a character from a book she'd read long ago. Elliot, she greeted him neutrally. This is unexpected. You look amazing, he said, his eyes taking in her simple but elegant black jumpsuit and the confident way she carried herself. Success suits you. Thank you, she replied, neither warm nor cold. What brings you here? He glanced around the gallery. I saw the write-up in Design Monthly. I wanted to congratulate you in person. He paused. And to apologize properly. For everything. Vanessa studied him, noting the shadows under his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. What happened with the partnership? Last I heard, Crawford and Weiss was still considering you. They decided to go in another direction, he said, the euphemism hanging heavily between them. After certain concerns were raised about my judgment, she nodded, understanding the implications. Diane had conducted her investigation thoroughly, as expected. And Morgan? A flash of pain crossed his face. She lost the baby at 6 months. The stress, the doctors said. He swallowed hard. After that, things fell apart. Her husband found out about us. She blamed me for everything. I'm sorry about the baby, Vanessa said, and meant it. Whatever her feelings toward Elliot and Morgan, an innocent child deserved no part in their drama. Yeah, he said, looking down. Me too. They stood in uncomfortable silence until Elliot spoke again. You didn't send the evidence to Crawford, did you? You could have destroyed me completely, but you didn't. That was never my goal, she replied honestly. I just wanted what was fair. Fair, he repeated with a hollow laugh. You got more than fair. You got brilliant. He gestured around the gallery. Look at all this. You're thriving without me. I'm thriving because of me, she corrected him gently. Not because of or in spite of you, he nodded, accepting the distinction. I should let you get back to your guests. As he turned to leave, Vanessa called after him. Elliot, why did you really come here tonight? He paused, his back to her. I guess I needed to see it for myself. That you're okay. Better than okay. He turned partially, his profile outlined against the gallery lights. And maybe I needed you to see me too. To know that you won. Vanessa shook her head. This wasn't a competition, Elliot, wasn't it? He asked with a sad smile. Because from where I'm standing, there's definitely a winner and a loser here. As he walked away, Vanessa felt a sudden release, the last lingering threads of resentment and anger finally dissolving. She hadn't needed to see him brought low to feel vindicated. Her own success and happiness were vindication enough. Everything okay? Alex appeared at her side, eyeing Elliot's retreating figure with suspicion. Yes, Vanessa said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Everything is perfect. Later that night, after the last guests had departed and the caterers were packing up, Vanessa lingered in the gallery alone. She walked among her creations, furniture pieces that balanced strength with elegance, durability with beauty. Each piece told a story of resilience and transformation, materials reimagined into forms that honored their inherent qualities while creating something entirely new. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She opened it to find a simple message. You were right. About everything. I'll remember you by your strength. Vanessa didn't respond. Instead, she slipped the phone back into her pocket and turned off the gallery lights one by one until only a single spotlight remained, illuminating her signature piece, a deceptively delicate-looking chair crafted from reclaimed wood and steel that could support over 1,000 pounds of weight. She'd named it Phoenix, standing in the doorway. Vanessa took one last look at the darkened gallery before closing the door behind her. Outside, the city pulsed with life and possibility. She had dinner plans with an architectural photographer she'd met through work, their third date, and the first time in a year she'd allowed herself to consider the possibility of letting someone new into her life. As she walked toward her future, Vanessa realized the title of her story had changed. It was no longer about a husband who left, or an ex who returned, or even the revenge that followed. It was simply about a woman who discovered her own power and refused to let anyone diminish it again. That was how she wanted to be remembered. Not as someone's wife or someone's victim, but as herself, complete, resilient, and entirely her own.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.